McLain.
McLain?
Yeah.
All right.
McLain.
McLain. It's like John McLain.
Yep.
Sick. You probably get that shit a lot. I'm sorry, that sucks.
No. It's every once in a while it comes up. So,
My
but it's not a bad association if you're to think of
Right.
the character. Hey, no,
Definitely.
pretty badass.
You
son's
say
middle
yippee
name is
ki
McLain because I like Norman McLain,
Okay.
the author.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So it's a Scottish name. So.
Well, we are speeding.
Ready?
Yeah?
Yeah, okay.
You want to kick it off?
Welcome to another episode of Life Distilled. I'm Cobey Williamson. I'm here with Andy McLain, Royal Foundry Craft Spirits, and my partner Brian Cary. And we're here in Minneapolis, Minnesota for the American Craft Spirits Association Conference. And we thought we'd pop into one of the local distilleries and share it with everybody here. So
Yeah.
thanks for hosting us, Andy.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for coming by. Hopefully I can make this entertaining. So.
Right.
That's always the conundrum, you know, is, whether or not we can.
So, okay. So, what are these cocktails in front of us again?
So you got the What's the Dill? It's a sour.
Okay.
And then we got Party Time, which is a shrub base. The Party Time is, I think that's a vodka, and I think they're both vodka, spirit-wise.
Okay.
And then there's infusion, so there's an infusion done with that. And actually, the Party Time is just the shrub, then it's put together. But there's a
Okay. And all with spirits made from here.
right now, so we've done some contract product initially to launch our cocktail program. So we're working on our gin R&D product right now. But currently, we've done a contract vodka, and then I've done a blended rum, and then we put together blended whiskey for going through a contract producer on that, a local producer in town.
So can you unpack that for us a little bit, Andy? Because I don't think the average person on the street understands what a contract producer is.
Okay.
And so they're like, hey, this is the local
What's going on?
craft spirits
Yeah.
place, and what's going on?
Well, in terms of the industry, once you get into it, obviously you quickly find out how the different parts and different facets of the industry work, and one of those is both in beer and in spirit industry is that you can rely on contract producers to get up and running. If you got some big aspirations, which we do, and we needed to create this great cocktail program to get started with, so we've tapped some producers that's they both do their own spirits, but they also produce to either on a big scale in terms of the macro contract producers to the micro contract producers. So there's a whiskey producer in Minnesota called Panther Distilling, and they're up north, just far enough outside of the Minneapolis metro area to really tap into people's imagination with a brand. So they've looked to really grow their whiskey production through contract production and doing some really good whiskey production and putting down a lot of barrels. I guess they are quickly growing their portfolio on that front. So hopefully I'm going in the right direction here, but ultimately, you've got that scale, and then you've got some big producers that work for are producing for a small craft producer or to a massive label that most people have seen on the shelf and just assume that that's produced by them or produced by them in some capacity. But ultimately, we're working with contract production product right now, but our end goal, anything that we're going to be putting on the shelf in terms of distribution, is going to be 100% produced by us. But in terms of our focus and direction, making a vodka to me is not something I want to focus on. So if I can put my efforts into making my gin, granted I need to make a good grain neutral spirit to produce that good gin. In our approach, our GNS, we are actually going to be producing ourselves for our gin. So
Awesome.
where for the vodka product, you obviously can buy bulk grain neutral spirit and then do the proofing and the filtering and all that stuff.
So not to put you on the spot, but do you think that's fair to the consumer? I mean, are you very transparent?
Yeah,
are most people
we're
very transparent about that?
Fully transparent in terms of anybody that's coming in here. We tell them, okay, this is what we've got currently, and this is what we're working on right now, and this is what we're expecting to have at our grand opening. So right now we're in our soft opening. So, again, in order for me to really get my bar program and my beverage director the product for them to make stuff and really get in tune, so ultimately once we get to that full grand opening that they're not they've got the tools and to work with. So but ultimately that is something we pretty much tell the consumer that this is what we've got, this is what we're working on, and this is where it's come from. So where I think, obviously if you weren't transparent, then it's that's where I think it kind of maybe gets a little iffy, I guess. So.
Yeah, because I think there's a little bit of a gray area there that actually kind of puts, real grain to glass distillers at a disadvantage, because Brian and I could quite easily go out and buy a tote full of GNS.
Yep.
Make a really cool bottle and a really cool brand.
Yep.
And then we'll have a lot higher margin than you are going to have.
Yep.
Because we don't have any overhead. We just all we need to do is pay for marketing. Now I can get out there on the shelf and really push myself.
Yep.
And kind of get ahead of Andy in Royal Foundry, because I got all this margin to work with in terms of marketing dollars, because I'm buying GNS for $4 a bottle, and
Yep.
I'm pricing my stuff for $27, and it looks craft, sounds craft, but nobody's crafting it. It's coming from what looks like a refinery if you were to go look at the place.
Yeah. Those are quite the facilities in terms of what they're able to do. Yeah, and again for us, that's there's producers in town, there's producers nationally that I know that's what they're looking at, is ultimately with their SKUs that are on their shelf, their stuff that they're putting out there as a package deal, that they're kind of, there's no transparency there, there's no conversation. It's here's our product that we've made, and again, for us that's, I could go down that pathway. Granted, again, within what we're doing right now with our cocktail program, we're having to use that. But I don't have, we have a tremendous space, but I don't have deep pockets to, I need to, make sure I've got something coming in initially, so then I can focus my attentions on crafting our gin, and then ultimately crafting our single malt whiskey. Right. And then everything from there forward, in terms of making, because I want to be able to take that time to age those barrels, and on the minimum for our single malt, I want to push it to 3 years.
Right.
So I know there's some producers that they'll push out something a little bit earlier, but to me I'd rather say, okay, here's what we've got right now to make a good cocktail. We've put something together with the contract producer. Here you go. It's a fantastic cocktail. And also for us, our approach is British style spirits. So my whiskey approach is single malt. So that doesn't necessarily lend itself in the down the road in the future to making a good old fashioned. So At the end of the day, if somebody is coming into my place, I want to serve them up a good old fashioned. I'm not going to be making it with my single malt eventually. So I think that ultimately will definitely have some American style blended whiskey that we've put together for that. So.
Yeah, it's clear that you kind of are working around a theme. You mentioned before we got started that this is your granddad. You kind of got the British phone booth, and you had some bowling, lawn bowling or regular bowling over here.
Well, yes, and 9-pin Skittles.
How'd you come to that?
So my family is all from England originally. I don't sound it, but I'm full British in terms of blood. I have dual citizenship. Ultimately, my parents came here for work, had the family, and then we moved back to England when I was 2, and then we went from England to Belgium, and we were there roughly for 6 years. But my formative years growing up with my cousins or spending time in England and all those things that appreciations for drink and whatnot came from that. Granted, it wasn't when I was in terms of my younger years, it'd be age 13 on up, but that's what, when I was visiting my cousins, we'd go out to pubs, and if you presented yourself as a mature person, you were able to drink and partake, and for the most part, I started off drinking spirits and then moved to beers, but that's I'm taking from my life experiences and pushing that into what we're producing, and then obviously the British focus comes from that. So,
very cool.
And then and ultimately we came back here. My dad's work brought him back to Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
And right before we came back, we were actually looking to move back to England. We were looking at houses there. We looked at 4 houses, and then all of a sudden, like a week later, we're going back to Minnesota, because my dad worked for Control Data. So,
what does your dad do?
He's retired now. He worked for Control Data doing computer development.
Oh, okay.
He was that kind of second wave post World War II of computer.
Wow.
Brain type people or whatever.
Here in Minnesota, though, that's
he came. At one point in time, he had an opportunity to go out. It was either Control Data or Cisco.
Okay.
Out in California.
Right.
He chose Control Data, which probably hindsight-wise, if he'd gone with Cisco, and this is Cisco in its infancy, would have been a whole different story. Then I probably wouldn't be here. So
right.
You could have skipped the contract distilling in that case.
Well, or I would have had an easier path to going about it.
Right.
Just like here.
Or you would have been in California. You would have wound up in California.
Yeah, or I might have gotten into the wine industry. Or
right.
Exactly.
Like that, yeah, definitely.
So, but again, looking at my family and my upbringing, where a lot of kids in America are taught how to play sports by their dad. My dad basically taught me about spirits, beer, and the finer things in life, enjoying food.
Yeah.
Because we would, growing up over there, we'd travel all over Europe, and it was like you're gonna eat what's presented to you at the plate. So big into squid and escargot and all the fancy French stuff. So
right.
Yeah.
Culinary adventure for sure.
Oh yeah.
In Europe. Huh. Damn.
So you mentioned, just kind of touched on some of the products. So what's your plan? What's your big vision? Tell us about the products and how you plan to roll them out, and where Royal Foundry is. You guys are open, but you're not grandly open.
Yeah, we're still in our soft opening. So ultimately, our 4 main. Well, I'm going to talk about the 3. The 4th, it's kind of tight to the vest, but the 3. British approach spirits are London Dry Gin, our Navy Style Rum, and our single malt whiskey. And then we're going to be doing some other British style liqueurs. But initially we're working on our gin product, really fine tuning that. I've pretty much got my botanical build pretty much there. It's just a matter of getting the right ratios and that right flavor profile, and also the process, from vapor to maceration, or doing a combo, or a little bit of this, a little bit, of that. So, so working on that, and we want to, in terms of what I'm pushing to the shelf, I want to get that fine-tuned and then put it to the shelves, and then work on the rum product and really get that tuned in where I want it. Because I know there's some guys that, and I think that's a bit to do with the fact that they might not have a cocktail room or a cocktail program, so it kind of their hand is forced to kind of get a vodka, get a whiskey, get a all the different approaches out to the shelf, so and pushing them right away, so they get that presence and that branding out there. So we're the position that we're in, we're afforded a little more time to really finesse each of those approaches, and then ultimately, the single malt will be after I've got the rum where I want it. Then I'm going to be working on laying some barrels down, but ultimately, really, then putting a lot of effort into fine tuning that product or that approach.
So what is the definition of a Navy style rum? Just for the listeners, and when I say that, it's really because I don't know.
Well, it's kind of a loose term because
I've heard of Navy strength gin.
Yeah, you got there's Navy strength, and when I refer to Navy style rum, I'm referring to so the British Royal Navy up until the mid 70s where they had a daily rum ration.
Okay.
And that rum would have been in a barrel on the ship. So, if you're classifying a Navy style rum, to me it's, a Caribbean style rum or British West Indies that has spent time in the barrel and either has a bit of a barrel finish, or a bit of spice from that, and but we're not necessarily doing Navy strength, but it's kind of that's in terms of the because obviously we wanted to have a rum, but the British connection is through through the colonization of that part of the world. You look to like Myers rum that was started by not a British admiral, but the son of a British admiral. Mount Gay rum.
Yeah.
There was a lot of influence from the British westernization and probably some of the approach that they brought to that area to kind of maybe create a modern approach to that. So
very cool.
So that's in terms of, and I could be wrong in terms of classifying it as a Navy style rum. There might be somebody that might have a different opinion on that.
No, that's awesome. No, like I was just curious because I was like, whoa, that's rad. It's so high proof rum because that's up my alley. But so are you thinking about aging your rum then, or just?
Well, yeah. So the plan is to do a finish in a bourbon barrel and then a port barrel.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
that'd be nice.
So obviously port right now and port barrels is a lot of people are having fun with those, but ultimately the combo platter of the bourbon and the port, and then also our wash bill that we're going to be putting together using panela and some other sugarcane, molasses, and there's another sugarcane byproduct that I'm looking to put in there that I come across from it's a British show.
Okay.
But you might, if anybody, I'm not going to give it away, but
the Great British Baking Show. Is that what it is? I love that show. I do love that show. Okay.
Maybe.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So, that's.
Did I really got it? I guessed it? Shut up.
Yeah.
No, I was about to.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's one of the things that's really so exciting about craft spirits in America right now is just all that experimentation and how your personality, your family history, and then like your own interpretation of some of these definitions are able to now come out in an expression that people are going to be able to taste and try and kind of decide if they want to put on the shelf or entertain their friends with.
And I was just thinking, like, we've done so many podcasts at distilleries that have, they have their portfolio, they have their lineup.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're still like a blank canvas and you're like, where should I place this first brush stroke? It's like, that's really cool. It's really fun to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, well, and the reason for that is I wanted to have an authentic approach, so taking from what I know, and then also I wanted to have a bit of a compass in terms of, where we were going with our, because with our approach and what we're going to be producing, and not to be going in all sorts of different directions. Granted, we'll produce some stuff that will purely be a modifier product for the cocktail room, but we'll never, again, in terms of our our offerings to the shelves and to distribution will be, again, staying within that, with that focus, and that way we can really, I don't know, say hit home runs, but really, make those special, but also, really, provide something that, might, on a craft style approach that might not be done locally. Because I know a lot of craft producers are, they're going in an American approach, American style, and that's great, but for us, I wanted to do something that was going to kind of, I don't know, resonate with me, and then hopefully resonate with the consumer. So,
well, I think that's really important, Andy, just because, something that I always ask every craft distiller that we interview is really, what is your value proposition to people?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I can go buy commodity alcohol for, $10 a liter or less.
Yeah.
When you do it smaller, your costs go up, and your overhead rises, and your margins go down. So your price point's different. So then, what is the value proposition? Yeah. Sometimes it's because you're local, right?
Yeah.
But in a city like Minneapolis, where there's a whole bunch of distilleries and there's multiple locals, how do you differentiate yourself and make a name for yourself and offer the consumer something new that's your own value proposition? And that's why I think what you're doing and the things that you said about remaining authentic to your own roots, and having that compass that not only for you but also for your customer base to be like, hey, we can expect if we go down to Royal Foundry, they're going to have some new, in this, British tradition offering that we probably have never even heard of before, which is really exciting, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, and that's, and for us is to be able to really, again, in-house for some of those seasonal or kind of one-off approaches to really, provide a gin experience that you might not get somewhere else, even on a national, international scale. And then also with the single malt production, there's obviously some single malt producers, in the States, they're doing a fantastic job, but again, just kind of what I've learned about the industry and how I want to approach that production, I know there's something I can give that will be dynamic in that crafting or micro approach to single malt whiskey. And I'm excited to really get into that, and hopefully, have some fantastic results with that. So,
yeah, I think American single malt's the way of the future.
Yep.
I think it's really, I've tasted some amazing American single malts.
Well,
already.
and especially obviously you got producers like Westland. I know Corsair. They too have had a whole lot of fun with what they're taking those the beer malts and working with those. But you got a lot of other approaches. The Japanese approach, which again was inspired by this. They were trying to be their own blender in Japan, but they didn't have other single malt producers to provide them with their single malt, so they had to create it their own. So, taking some inspiration from that, and all, kind of, again, all, at the end of the day, all goes back to Scotland, but but making it, uniquely our own in-house approach too.
Yeah.
So it's not just, but as single malts go, there's a lot more to offer and a lot more to come, I would say.
Yeah, I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg as far as that's concerned, because everybody's, you say this industry is maybe 15 years old, on the outside, and some people are just bringing some of their barrels out. Folks that have been in there 5-10 years, and so
really
exciting.
and how they've managed their barrel programs, and to see some of the stuff that's dynamic or starting to be more dynamic product coming out in that front. So
with you being in Minnesota here, are you able to source a lot of your grain and your things from here, or your approach dictate that you got to do that a little differently? Or
yes and no. In terms of, I might, I'm not say upset people, but in terms of our approach on the mash bill and the grain approach, I know there's a lot of people that have put a lot of focus on where the grain source is coming from and the attributes of that grain source. For me, my concern with that is not necessarily where it's coming from, but the quality of and that consistency. So it is local, but it's not coming locally, it's coming nationally. Is raw maltings in Shakopee, but most part their malted barley is coming from Washington State, which has some of the best product. At least that's what I'm told. But in terms of the efforts that RAR goes to making that a consistent, malted barley, so every time you're getting that product, you're going to have that consistency. So if you're trying to, replicate that product over so many barrels, that to me that's the greater concern, is quality and consistency, and then also what other offerings can they provide? Because if I want to, again, do a lot of that Scottish approach, I'm going to also have to look to, providers, maltings from Scotland. So, and RAR, BSG, they own BSG, and BSG has all these other accounts with, Scottish malts. So.
No, that's it's funny because you say like you just want to source the perfect malt. I did a podcast in Amsterdam, and she did not believe in fermenting any of her own product. She said fermenting is a sign of the amateur distiller. Yeah. I just distill. Yeah. So it's like you can take it down to everything, I guess, to every stage, and that's. I think it's really cool when people do it all in house. But at the same time, it's just funny because I've heard that before. About
and also once you start to work with the different products and kind of test the waters, you kind of start to figure out, okay, what makes sense for your approach? Because I know there's producers out there that's by necessity they have to go into a certain direction, and you don't necessarily want to bang your head against the wall trying. At the end of the day, we're trying to make a tasty drink, a tasting offering, something that will complement a cocktail or be the main focus in that cocktail. But it's there's and also to each his own. To me, that's like, if you want to go about it this way or if you want to go about that way, what's your end result? What are you trying to produce? And for what I'm trying to produce, that's kind of, that's where I'm going with, and that could obviously change too, and there might be something like, I want to have maybe just a bit of local malted barley from a certain farmer that I know, hey, this, I like what they're, presenting, or I like that profile and that. But if you look to a lot of, malted barley products, especially if you get into the beer malts, they're at the end of the day, they are, from one producer to the next, you might taste a bit of difference, but they're all kind of approaching that in the same way. So,
again, that's kind of one of the things that's so interesting about the craft spirit scene, and just how many, the tree just branches so rapidly. It's like Brian said, I'm not as certain what the exact specifics are, but generally I understand that in England, for the longest time, you couldn't even make your own GNS. You had to buy it from like these 3 Royal
producers.
bulk producers,
Yep.
because they really wanted that to be the same to see what kind of a gin master you were.
Yep.
So that you would tweak out your gin recipe, and that's what we were going to judge you on.
Yeah,
not what your base liquor was.
Yeah, it's almost like the Masters approach in terms of golf approach is that the Masters golf course is always the same. So on some levels you'll get the really testing the golfers on an equal level, where it's not just what's going on weather-wise or what's the new location, etc. But yeah, in terms of that gin approach, at the end of the day, some of the best gins out there are using a GNS or grain neutral spirit to really get their product going and really make their botanicals really sing. So, they want to have that, as you're saying, that palate that is kind of consistent for everybody across the board. And that's the thing in England. There's always been, that kind of, you have to have, like the pint glasses and everything has always been on these, European offerings that have to be consistent, or approved by Her Royal Majesty. So, or whoever is the crown head. So.
What's also so interesting about it is it also creates this opportunity for the consumer to be able to drill down into whatever is their thing they value.
Yeah.
So if you value grain to glass and you just want to buy, spirits, you don't care if one batch is different from the next batch, but you're always going to get grain from Bob the farmer or corn from Bob the farmer down the road. So you're always going to go to this particular distiller. You have that option. You could put your money towards that and support that guy.
Yeah.
Or if you want to just try to find the best gin in America, you got that opportunity as well. So the landscape is just incredible.
Yeah, and I think going back and tying that back to the transparency aspect, that's, as long as you're, in whatever approach and whatever however you're going about producing your spirits, as long as you're being transparent, but also being authentic. You're not trying to convince the consumer that, well, because I'm using this, it makes it that much better. Well, is sourcing that, barley or that grain from whoever or that farmer down the street, what is the benefit of that? Is he doing something different to it? Is it a different different species or whatever, in terms of, or providing a grain that is not grown by anybody else, that's, where you can actually, you can taste that distinct flavor coming from that product.
Yeah, I think there's that element of terroir that some people are starting to investigate, and then I also think, and I speak about this a lot in these podcasts, and I've kind of let out the throttle a little bit on it. But I think there's bigger economic questions that are being addressed by craft spirits. I think the rise of craft spirits was related more to larger economic concerns than they are really to ideas around taste or palate or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's nice that there is the opportunity that, hey, I just want a product that's made here.
Yep.
There's these ideas around circular economies and kind of the whole local thing, but I really think that there's some folks that are trying to strive towards that, so that they can point to producers that they know aren't going outside of the boundaries of their local ecosystem, and just try to keep everything there. But that's a different goal than what somebody else might be trying to do.
Yeah, definitely.
And in a town like this, how does that play into the landscape?
Well, obviously there's within locally, there's certain producers that are going in that direction, and there's also there's kind of you run the gamut, but again, ultimately for that consumer, and that obviously building the consumer that is looking for the benefit of having that product that is everything's sourced locally and everything is truly coming from not the neighborhood, but their local area to produce it. There's that way of having that dynamic connection with your consumer. and then there's also the way of, you know, showcasing and being able to, you know, talk about, hey, this is what we're working on. You know, we're really building these relationships. You know, in the 6 weeks that we've been in our soft opening, you know, I love being able to talk about, you know, talking about our gin approach and what we're working on, and some of the difficulties I'm having, and some of the successes I'm having with that, you know, the patron or consumer, whatever you want to call them. But that you know, that is, I think that's you know, where I think we're offering a value, is that I'm always, you know, going to be, you know, be here to answer the question, or be like, hey, this is how we're working our production now. This is what I'm doing, and I'm not just a face, or I'm not just taking my family story and trying to spin a brand. I want to really always be striving to make something that is, you know, really tasty, really good, and people hopefully will love. So, and then
I really like what you're saying when you say, you know, call them the patron.
Yeah.
And just to your point, you know, when we walked in, you were behind the bar, and,
yeah.
and you were chatting with some people and breaking things down for folks, and you know, I think that's what this ultimately is all about. I also harken back to your comment about the pub, because I really think that's a huge paradigm shift in American culture, that we moved away from the tavern, and that we're back to the pub, and that you know, the breweries in Montana have to close at 8 o'clock, and they're talking about pushing that back to 10, and I'm kind of upset about that, because it's going to change the dynamic. You know, we'll still leave at 8 o'clock, but right now I go there with our kids, and the kids run around and they play darts and they, you know, roll on the bowl, and it's wonderful because it's a community thing. And there's not public drunkenness. You know, that people are chill. You can only have 4 pints, and you know, some of those are 7%. So you can tie one on if you want to.
It's not perceived as a nightlife space. And that, well, speaking of pubs in England, that's, you know, that's the history of pubs for the most part in England, is they close at 10, if not earlier. So, you know, you're going there after work. You're going there to, you know, to talk and chat and have conversations, and kind of have, you know, talk about, you know, your life, but also talk about, you know, world events, to just bantering in general. So, you know, that's, and ultimately with what we're doing here, you know, we're a distillery with a cocktail room. It's, you know, not a pub, but at the end of the day, I wanted to, within the confines of a distillery and cocktail room, I still wanted to have some of that feel and vibe in a contemporary approach, because, you know, we have our local Anglo-phile or Irish-style pubs in town, and you know, for us, you know, I wanted to do something different, but yet, again, celebrating, you know, British culture in my family upbringing. So.
Yeah, the other thing I like about it is I think it's just providing a whole different context around drinking to my kids.
Yeah.
So, you know, the way I grew up, you know, drinking was like this rebellious, under the table thing that we did, you know, in high school and what have you. My kids don't have that same perception, because that's not how we brought them up. You know, a cocktail is something you have after dinner with some friends. It's not something that you pound 4 of and you know, go tearing off through the wall like Wile E. Coyote or something.
It's done. Well, going back to England or Britain in general, that's kind of, you know, for my upbringing, my dad, you know, that was the approach, was to kind of have that family environment. So, you know, I wasn't going to be reckless in how I went about it. Granted, you know, as anybody does, and in high school and college, you still have those moments, but for the most part, if anything, I've always had a strong appreciation for, you know, good beer and good spirits well before. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but, you know, that was the reality when all my friends were drinking, you know, bad beer and bad product. For me, it was like, no, I have to have my my good beer. So I was drinking, bitters and drinking European style beers where, everybody else was drinking Bud Light or something else. This is, right in the infancy, or at least in Minnesota, of the craft brewing market. So.
Yeah, I think everybody kind of has that time when they have to test the boundaries. And Brian and I were talking about it on the drive over here because, he's from California, so he was looking at the roads and he's like, boy, you got to start braking like half a block before you plan to stop. And I said, yeah, most of the time when you grow up driving on these roads, you find out where that line is because you go over it and you end up in the ditch. And then you go, okay, from now on, I'm going to drive a little differently. So it tends to happen. It's easy to do with this kind of stuff.
All right.
What do you think? What do you think of this stuff, Brian?
I'm already a cocktail in. That's great. No, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I like the twist on the dill. What happened to your foot? What's the story with there?
So trying to get this place done, which I put a lot of my own efforts into, because I was my background before I got into this was building custom houses. So I was trying to, in a frantic, trying to get stuff done, and I had a big load of material in the back of my pickup, and I was trying to shift it around, and the load got too big as I was stacking up the plywood. And I pushed, and my Achilles was not having it, and my Achilles ruptured or tore. And so
Oh God.
Yeah, there you go. That's the story. So so I ultimately, this was like a couple weeks before we were trying to do our soft opening.
Okay.
And to kind of put it in perspective, I was building tables. I was the Union Jack flag that we have, working on that, putting that together. I built the bar top. Any of these surfaces around here, I was trying to work on our curved tile, or the curved wall for the tile. If I had more time, I would have.
That's supposed to be like the two, right?
Yeah, London Underground.
Yeah,
Ultimately, there's going to be a graphic going across between the two advertising posters.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then there'll be some other bits and pieces, but I always wanted to do something, with shape, and, something that was not, I hadn't seen, at least locally, and I wanted to have a story behind our back bar. So, but going back to the, trying to get that stuff done. So I did my Achilles in. So that was not fun.
You're literally only 6 weeks in.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Still got a good crowd here for 6 weeks.
Well, it was snowing all day today. So we got from Minnesota. We got this past week and a half. We got punched in the face, and we had a pretty mild winter leading up to this. So just like any first snowfall or any first weather incident or occurrence, it's like people freak out. So crowds have been a little bit, we had some really good crowds coming out the gate, and then consistently, and we also have had a lot of local people, and people in the neighborhood starting to come across us, because we're still in our soft opening. We're kind of word of mouth. We've done some social media, but so we're really happy with, the people coming here, and then how many people are showing up, and then also
the locals.
Locals, but just also with our front of the house, our staff have done a really good job of making people's time here enjoyable. So
that's awesome.
Well, we certainly appreciate you warming things up from -20 for us. It's almost plus 20, so that's a step in the right direction. For any out-of-towners, thankfully it's somewhat respectable 20-some degrees right now. So, and then during the winter time, when it's 20 and there's no wind, and you got some Arctic sun or some or not much wind, it's actually pretty enjoyable out there. But it's coming from somebody that's spent a lot of time in Minnesota, so for some people it's still somewhat shocking, but right. Well, when Brian landed, he texted me. He said, did we land on an ice cube? And then later I let him know that when I left Montana, it was -2.
Yeah.
So it actually warmed up coming here. So
Yeah.
things are all right.
Well, the American Craft Spirits Association convention, it's what the theme of it is it ACSA on ice, I want to say.
Oh, yeah.
Craft on ice?
Yeah, Craft on Ice.
Craft on ice, that's good.
Well, at least it has the feel and look of it, because
Right.
how many weeks ago it was, for Christmas we barely had any snow. It was
Really?
dusting. So if you're going to live in this part of the country and you don't have a nice white Christmas, it's a little bit, kind of is a little bit upsetting. So I'm of the mindset, if we're going to be here, at least have some nice fluffy white coating to make everything look pretty. So
Yeah, no, nothing like a fresh coat.
yeah.
So Andy, what's the timeline for your open, and tell us about that, and then how people can get a hold of you. And
So grand opening, we're looking either the end of this month. We've talked about the 20th, but it might be pushed back a little bit further, maybe going into March.
and then you hope to have bottle sales out of here.
Yeah,
of
we're gonna
your
do.
gin?
Yeah, we'll stay to Minnesota for bottle sales from distilleries. You can do a half bottle, 375, 1 bottle per day per person. So our first offering that people will be able to take with them will be the gin. And then in terms of our grand opening, we're going to have this initial one in the wintertime, and then in the summertime we'll do even a greater grand opening, because we'll have on the outside, on the south side of our building, we're going to have, I'm not sure if you came across this, but we're going to have this Cycle Speedway, which is a British bike sport, bicycles, and that's 4 cyclists, single speed, no brakes, and contacts legal. It's like short track speed skating, but on bikes. So it's a British sport. So not only will you be able to enjoy a nice cocktail, you'll have a bit of atmosphere on the outside. And I wanted to have something that, in town has not been done, and even stateside will be the first proper. We'll have the first proper cycle speedway track stateside, and then we'll have league formats and then semi-pro leagues. So yeah, that's part of the reason why we have a good amount of space, is that to facilitate that both inside and outside, and also in terms of this marketplace, it's a big cycle community. So I wanted to present something I think the cycle market will really have fun with, and another way to compete, because it's an opportunity for people to compete individually or in teams. So, and where was I going with this?
Shit, I can't wait to come back.
Yeah,
do another one.
Yeah, so
every year.
Our address, if anybody's in Minneapolis, is 241 Fremont Avenue North. We're just maybe 5 minutes from downtown. We got views of downtown. There's 394, which is the major artery coming from the west, highway-wise, where there's an exit, maybe a quarter mile, if that, and then we're ultimately going to have a light rail station just down the street. We have bike trails coming in here, both road, and then not too far from here is we've got 26 miles of single track biking. So
beautiful.
Yeah, so a nice relationship will be built with all the cycle people in the neighborhood, and we already have some people that we know in the industry that were really they're really excited to take part in that. So
outstanding. Well, again, thanks for having us.
Yeah,
this
thank
has
you for
been a real
coming.
hoot.
Cheers, yeah.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to seeing where everything goes and keeping tabs on you. So.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Yep.
Cheers, man.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I've got my water, but
Right.
cheers.
That was good enough. I housed that cocktail. It was good.